Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the next episode in our Zoom for Thought in Conversation series. My name's Dan Harding. I'm Head of Music Performance here at the University of Kent. And welcome to these sessions in which we invite luminaries from the world of music into the virtual studio here to talk about a career in the arts, working in the live music scene, what life has been like keeping things going during lockdown, and also aspirations for life post-lockdown as restrictions start to lift and we're able to start looking ahead to a brighter future. This week we have a very special guest who will be interviewed by my colleague Ian, who is director of the University of Kent Concert Band and Big Band. So I'll leave it to Ian to introduce our guest, but please give a very warm virtual round of applause to my colleague Ian as we welcome him into the studio. Ian, welcome.
Hi Dan, how's it going? You okay?
I'm well, nice to see you. How's life with you?
Not too bad at all. Just hoping we can get back to actually doing some live things in the next few weeks, which is looking a little bit more positive, thanks to a lot of effort you've put in actually, so thanks for that. And it'd be great to be back in front of the bands in the Collier Ferguson, of course.
Well, I mean, it's been very much a team effort, hasn't it, with both my colleague Sophie and I and you and all the other visiting music staff doing our, indeed, as you know, it's happening across the wider university community and beyond. Everyone's doing what they can to make the very best of the situation over the past year. But you're right, we've really missed hearing the thronging hordes of concert band and big band rehearsing in Collier Ferguson. So hopefully not too long now until life can resume.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah, we're. I think it's just one of those things where now it's that creative side and the sort of buzz of performing live, as when we talk in a second, is what we've all missed so much. And hopefully there is a light there now, and we can get back to it. If gradually, but we're getting there.
That's right, and just to have that wonderful electricity of performing with an ensemble, as sat amongst other musicians playing live to a live audience again. Hopefully, it won't be long before we're able to start raising the roof of Collier Ferguson once more.
Absolutely.
So I'll leave it to you to introduce our guest this week, a very special guest I know we've been looking forward to welcoming. So without further ado, I shall retire and hand over to you. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, it gives me great pleasure, really, to do this. I'm really looking forward to it. I think, like lots of musicians, we've all missed performing and playing so much, and the opportunity to talk music to fellow musicians and indeed friends is something we have missed, and I'm really looking forward to this. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to the room Mr. Phil Veacock.
Hello, Ian.
How's it going, Phil? All good?
It's very good, thank you. Yes, very, very good.
Excellent. Yeah. So, people watching this podcast are not really going to believe this, but it was 39 years that we first met.
Oh, my goodness me. Well, someone posted some photos on Facebook. I think it was yesterday. It might have even been you, actually, of us playing practically that amount of time ago. And I was looking at them and trying to work out exactly how long ago it was. But we were all a lot thinner.
All a lot thinner. Yeah, all a lot thinner. The biggest difference is the hair. I never remember having that much hair.
Perversely, I think I had less hair then because my hair, my hair's kind of just growing upwards, and I very, very much need a trip to my barber, which I'm looking forward to. At the end of next week. So
yeah,
I've got it.
Mine seems to naturally take care of itself, but anyway, never mind. So it is. I came to Canterbury 40 years ago this September.
Wow.
I did leave for a few years, but. So so I was ahead of you at Christchurch.
Yeah,
you came in. That's it. Yeah, you came in the following year. But if for a second we go pre-Christchurch, pre-Canterbury days,
down the time tunnel.
Yeah, completely. This is where I can actually ask a question and I can't remember.
It'll go all swirly and we'll go just like that.
It will, yeah, it will. No doubt it will. That'll be the effects that Dan puts on with his technology whiz kid afterwards, yeah. So Something I often think about, when I'm teaching particularly, is, and you're trying to inspire young people.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you were aware of the saxophone?
Well, not really the saxophone, because when I was very little, I started on the recorder. When I was at primary school, and I can remember my very first recorder lesson and learning B-A-G and learning to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I think it was, or Bar Bar Black Sheep or something like that. And I'm just thinking, this is great, this is brilliant. I can make a tune just by moving my fingers. And I became a bit obsessed with the recorder. I'm sure my parents were very pleased. But my sister also played the recorder before me, so they were kind of used to it. But I became a bit of a recorder virtuoso quite quickly. I did it very
I didn't know
easy.
I didn't know the thing existed.
I know. Well, we were at primary school, and what it was quite a strange thing at my primary school was that they had like a kind of recorder consort, they call it, don't they? An ensemble that played in assembly every day, played the hymns with the teacher played the piano and the people played the recorder. And all of the other children had to sit on the floor.
Right.
And sort of sing in discomfort, but the recorder ensemble got to sit on nice chairs and just kind of be like apart from everyone else. And I think it was that sort of sense of like, oh, okay, if I do this, then I'm kind of a bit special. I'm like kind of I'm kind of separate. I'm up here. I'm sitting on a nice chair. You've got to sit on the floor. And it was a kind of thing of like seeing the world from the bandstand at a very early age. I think that kind of went, oh, hello, this is good. I like this, And as I say, I did tend to kind of show off with my recorder, and I used to play it with my nose and things like that.
Yeah, I still do.
But after that, when it became clear that I was sort of quite good recorder, my parents said, "Oh, let's try you on something else. Let's put you on a clarinet." So I got a clarinet, and I started having lessons from a guy called Bill Watson, who was an RAF bandsman. He was in the central band of the RAF. In fact, lots of my music teachers were in the central band of the RAF, because it was
home
nearby
that way.
Uxbridge.
Yeah, Uxbridge.
It was in Uxbridge, and that's where it was stationed. And so they all kind of got outside gigs, like teaching all the kids in the area, And as I say, Bill Watson was one of those, and he was a lovely fella. And what I used to be quite excited about was quite often when I went and had my clarinet lesson, he would have to interrupt the lesson because people would phone him up with offers of gigs. And he had a couple of bands, like dance bands and things, and he would be talking to the people like organising these gigs. And I was thinking, this is quite cool. I like the sound of this, because he'd be kind of saying, yeah, and it would cost this much. I'd be going, that's loads of money. Wow, so you can get paid money for doing like playing. That's good.
Yeah.
And then I joined the local music centre bands, and every so often it was a very good band, and we took part in kind of competitions, concert band, wind band. And we took part in various sort of competitions and things, and that would involve getting a coach somewhere. And it's that thing of like late night being on the road, being a musician. And that was another thing that kind of went, oh, hello, I like this. This is good. I like the kind of that kind of slight sort of melancholy and the kind of thing of the job well done, that you've played, and now you. I just that kind of, and I thought, this is great. I want to do this. Thanks. This is brilliant. And that's kind of that was kind of the start of it, really. So that's probably a very full answer.
No, it's a great answer because it's interesting. You know, I never went down the recorder route. You see, I was a desperately failed violinist, and can you imagine it? I remember distinctly being in the violin class with a lady called Mary Goodman that was a bit of a legend at the day, and there was three of us in a line, and you know, one of those scars you have as a child. And I remember being in the class, you know, with the violin. And then at the end, she took the violin off me and she said, "Well, I think this isn't for you." And you know when you get that bottom lip because of the shame? Yeah. And that was it. That was the end of it. And my sister Jill was the recorder player. So once she sees this, she'll absolutely kill me for mentioning that. But she was. So I never ever, as a result of that, I had never any inclination to play the recorder whatsoever. But I heard the clarinet played in a corridor, but you know, and I didn't even know what the instrument was called. It was a piece by Howard Ferguson called Burlesque, and it was a grade 5 piece. And that was my route. But that thing about being on the coach, it was interesting because I was always, you know, into football at school. Sure. And my buzz was football. But I then remember playing in one of the local, you know, the school bands and getting on a coach to go somewhere. Then people coming on the bus afterwards and saying, "Oh, you know, that was really great." And it was that buzz of, "Oh, hang on a minute, you can get a buzz from playing music in the same way as I could from playing football at the time." And then I think, so when you took up the sax, and you went down that route, do you remember a sort of a particular player that really was like the moment when you thought, "Wow, that is what it's all about"? Or
I'm not sure there was one particular player, but what I did notice, because suddenly the saxophone sort of became on offer. Because Bill Watson, my clarinet teacher, he also played the saxophone. And he kind of said to my parents, "Oh, I was wondering if he'd quite like the saxophone." He's sort of, you know, that would be good. And what I noticed was that all the bands on Top of the Pops had saxophones in them. Yeah. None of them had clarinets in them, right? Except for, I think, Supertramp had a clarinet.
Supertramp.
But hang on. And then at the time, it was all the kind of two-tone things were coming out, and all of the band, there was Beat, and there was Madness, and there was all sorts of, like, people had, you know, they all had saxophones in them. And I thought, this is good. I could be in bands, and girls like people in bands. That would be quite a good way to get to catch the eye of the ladies, right? So
and here we are, 39 years later.
Here we are, yes. Exactly. So I asked for a saxophone for Christmas, and amazingly got one. And I think it was I worked out exactly which Christmas it was, and it was whatever Christmas when Rat Trap by the Boomtown Rats was number one. It was the year of Grease. I think 79.
Right. Okay.
Might be Christmas 79. Might be one either side of that. 78 maybe. But that's when I got my first saxophone. And because I could play the clarinet, I could sort of play the saxophone. And people couldn't really tell that obviously they're different. And we now know that that's, playing the saxophone essentially ruined my clarinet playing. But that's all right. And because I liked playing the saxophone a bit more. So I think instantly I got my saxophone. I could sort of play it a bit and could be in bands, which I then was, sort of straight away. There was a band. My first band, I think the first band I was in was a band called the Revels.
Nice.
And it was kind of we did covers of there was kind of funky, sort of funky covers of stuff,
Yeah.
And we did.
So when you did, So when you came to Christchurch then in about
Yeah.
82, you'd not
Yes.
really be, you'd only been really playing the saxophone for about 3 years then.
Yes. I'd say so.
Yeah,
It's 3 or 4 years, maybe. Yeah.
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 And of course, on arriving in Canterbury, of course, in Canterbury we had the legend that is Tony Coe, who was a
Yes. Well, you
resident.
know what? I actually wrote to Tony Coe to ask for lessons, and he sent me back. I wish I'd kept it, actually. I don't know where it is. I must have thrown it away. But he sent me back a very long letter explaining in great detail why he couldn't possibly give me lessons. And it was
Really?
it was like sort of yeah, it was well reasoned, but it made no sense really.
No, that
You see
sounds,
what I
yeah.
mean?
He was a very
It
unique.
was
He is a very unique character, isn't he? Let's be honest.
yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
a player. I mean, I've seen him play many times in sort of fairly official and unofficial guises, and what a staggering technician
Yeah.
he
Oh
was.
yeah.
But yeah, so then sort of Christchurch comes along, and
Yes.
right then, what can we sort of say about that? Blimey! And of
Well,
course,
I my first sorry, go on. My first thing was that I moved in to Diggs, and the first person I met was Peter Cook,
oh
who I was
my, I'm
sharing a
so
room
sorry.
with. I was sharing a room with him, and we got on very well straight away. And he played the trumpet, of course, in those days.
Yeah,
And the college band, well, there was a few college bands, weren't there? But the one that had sort of just been formed and had just won the competition was the Larks.
yeah.
And the Larks asked Peter to play trumpet,
Mm.
and he said, "Yes, of course I will." And did you know that my mate Phil plays the saxophone?
Really? Is that how it
And
happened? Wow.
yeah. And so he said, we'll bring him along as well." So I came along as well, and we both sort of suddenly were the brass section with Tommy, because Tommy played saxophone as well.
Well, I
And
remember
that's
Tommy.
sort of how it happened.
That's incredible because I remember Tommy so well, and I can remember it. I was very much a clarinetist then, and dabbled in a bit of saxophone. But I do remember so well being somewhere in college, and Tommy Barlow, who was the front man of the Larks, coming to me with this saxophone and asking me if I could give him a few clues about how it worked. And I sort of was like, really? Um, and yeah, for those people sort of watching this, any ex Christchurch people, but the Larks, as Phil has just said, started, around that time, early 80s, and very much. Well, I mean, Phil, you can tell us, but it was the Marquee Club in London, many tours, TV appearances. It was so nearly the House Martins, wasn't it, in the respect of its its
Well, I
profile?
mean, that's jumping ahead a bit, but the House Martins, what happened with that? We'll kind of leap forward in time slightly. We were the Larks were now in London and doing well and having quite a big
Yeah,
following, and we got offered a record contract with Go Disc Records,
mm.
and I'm not sure quite what the connection was, but Phil Jupitus, who in those days, the comedian, who is now, who in those days was Porky the Poet, he was a big
Right.
fan of ours. He used to introduce us. Uh,
Wow.
he would sort of introduce us on stage. She did it a couple of times at the Marquee, I think. I can't remember the other places that he did, but he was the sort of roadie for Billy Bragg. He was very good friends with Billy Bragg, who was also on Go Disc. And I
Wow.
think that
Okay.
maybe that was somehow the connection. Anyway, we got offered a contract, And we had a look at it, and we saw it was a really terrible contract, and that we wouldn't have made any money from it at all. So we kind of said, well, no, we don't know. Let's go back and talk about this, because it's not, we didn't get any of the publishing. The whole thing was not very good. A week later, after we'd said no, we were playing at the Rock Garden in Covent Garden, and the support band was a band from Hull called the House Martins, and the guys from Go Disc, Andy, I can't remember his name, Andy McDonald or something like that. He turned up and signed the House Martins with the same deal that had offered us in our dressing room to rub it in.
I didn't realise that. I didn't realise that.
Yeah. But you'll notice the House Martins had good success. They had a couple of hits, didn't they? And but then it was only lasted like a year or 2 years or something, and then they split up. And the reason for that was because their deal was so bad they didn't make any money, and that's the deal that we turned down. So in a way, so we could have had that success, but we sort of chose to not.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting.
It could have been very different,
Yeah, well, it's interesting because the percussionist in my youth orchestra, this bizarre connection, was Hugh Whittaker.
Oh, well, Hugh
Whittaker was the drummer in the House Martins.
Didn't he murder someone or something?
Well, no, not quite.
Him terribly.
Yeah, no, not quite. It was. I saw him many years later. He had a failed business deal, and he went after the guy with the baseball bat, and he went in strange ways for a while. And he told me that it was quite a weird experience walking onto the gallery in his first day as an inmate of Strange Ways, and all the prisoners were singing Happy Hour.
Oh dear! I remember him being a really nice bloke. He was
lovely guy.
Him being really, really gentle, and when I heard about his trouble, I thought that's odd, because he didn't seem like that at all. He seemed like a really nice man, and I remember him being making a very, very good cup of tea. Where he like warmed the pot, and he did the whole. He really kind of worked hard. Yeah, exactly. It was a delicious cup of tea. So well done, Hugh. Is he still going? Is he all right?
I don't know. I've lost contact with. I lost contact with them because they sort of morphed into the beautiful South as well, didn't they? There was that whole and so that. But
Dave Cunningham, yeah.
That's right, yeah. So the photographs you were talking about yesterday that was sent, they were actually sent to me by Mark from the Larks.
Oh yeah,
he's found him.
Our main archivist. Well, I have to salute Mark, really, because he has taken the sort of the Larks into a sort of new life beyond the band, where we are now. There's quite a lot of we've got quite a big following. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but we are kind of quite big in Japan. Because there's quite a lot of Japanese. There's a couple of Japanese bands have covered some Larks songs, in particular Maggie Maggie Maggie, and. Yeah, I mean, there was talk. Well, actually, before the lockdown, we were kind of discussing the first lockdown a year ago. We were sort of discussing about going into the studio as the Larks and doing some more things, but that obviously got knocked on the head.
Yeah, you see, that was the question I was going to answer there, because anybody watching this, and I'm sure there will be plenty of people, with that sort of the Canterbury Christchurch connection, would want to know that whether, let's be honest, Phil, life is very short. And, and there's no point. I mean, I was going to say, you've just answered it, I guess, but I was going to say, do you see a situation where you'd maybe, give it? Yeah, why not? Yeah.
I mean, it was very interesting because we'd all kind of kept in touch, and we'd all kind of meet up for beers and dinners. but we sort of lost touch with Tommy, and
Yeah,
he'd moved down to the West Country, and no
yeah,
one
it's
was
in
really in
Bristol,
touch
isn't
with him. And then finally, a couple of years ago, we sort of got back in touch, and we all met up. And it's, I don't know if you've ever, it's a really odd thing, because all of a sudden the dynamic all kind of fitted back together.
Amazing.
There'd always been, it's like there'd always been like a thing missing. And
Mm.
then when suddenly we were all there, you kind of went, oh, that's, of course, you know. And it was like,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know, it's a really interesting thing, that other
yeah,
person. What, you know, yeah,
yeah.
it's
Interesting.
interesting. But I think we there's, I don't know. I mean, we're all very long in the tooth now, and it's
Mm.
the whole thing of the Larks was the energy and the jumping about and that, which, let's face it, we've not really got anymore.
Well, you could just do a
But you know,
one-off.
I saw. I don't know if you saw. There was a very good documentary that Stuart Lee made about the band the Nightingales, from who are kind of post-punk band from Birmingham,
Right.
and it was on telly about a month ago, about how the guy who was the main person of the Nightingales, had managed to keep the band going ever since
Yeah.
sort of the 80s. And bizarrely, the Larks had been on the bill with the Nightingales a few times, and I didn't really remember them, but it was kind of interesting the way that it had kind of evolved, you know, how it
Yeah,
had sort
yeah,
of developed, and how it had
yeah.
gone from like the kind of young energetic thing to the kind of
Mm.
slightly more sedate,
Yeah.
middle-aged.
Well,
But that's good, you
anybody.
know, it's good.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, I think you should give it. I mean, let's face it. I think it would be such a celebratory thing. It would be so cool to see something come out, whether it was live or whether it was recordings after
Sure.
this. Anybody watching, of course, who has, isn't familiar with the work the Larks did. There are plenty of videos out there on YouTube and thing.
Well, there's a
Couple of
lot
TV
of stuff
films.
on, everything's on Spotify and on
Yeah,
Apple
yeah. So,
Music. So I think the best one, there's live at Coventry Polytechnic. I think
yeah, yeah,
that sort of shows us at our absolute sort of, you
yeah.
know,
It was a
tip
great
top.
live band.
Well, listening to those, I mean, I listened to them fairly recently, and I was struck by how incredibly tight it was, but
Yeah.
the way it could only have got to that level by doing a lot of gigs. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
There were like
Absolutely. Yeah.
things that were happening. There's things that were happening that could only have been that tight, and that you know exactly what the other people are going to do at this particular point.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
it's kind of interesting listening to it, because we really
Yeah,
had sort of honed it to kind of a really sort of very, very kind of tight thing, you know.
yeah. I
It's good.
remember seeing you at the Marquee, the famous
Yeah.
Marquee in Wardour. It was actually September the 11th, but I can't remember what year, but it was my birthday. And I do
Right.
remember there, and it was the most storming evening. I mean, I must admit, I don't remember the end of it, but it was a good night. But I just remember, what struck me, and I can see it now, was that having seen you all from the early days, in the student union at Christchurch,
Sure.
to
Yeah.
suddenly this slick, all or nothing girl, what a great tune. And, just seeing this very slick, and when I say act, I don't mean in over rehearsed, but it was just there. You knew what you were doing, and it had come so far.
Sure. Yeah.
And I still do remember that. So I think it's worth. There'd be plenty of people would love to hear some and see some stuff.
Well,
So
it's interesting. It's interesting how often it pop. You know, we get a mention from people sort of saying, "Oh my God, they were the best band of the '80s that never kind of." You know, if people
yeah,
talk about
completely.
it's weird. It's in a way we I think we were our own worst enemies, because we kind of we shot ourselves in the foot so many times. I think it was like,
Well,
it's
it's
never going to be. But it's just a
it's the
shame, really.
wonders
But
of
there we are.
yeah. wonders of hindsight, isn't it? I mean, that's the whole thing, you know. I mean, Phil and I, you know, we you know, for those people watching, we dabbled in a band called the C4 Stompers, which I've
Oh
got very
yes.
little recollection of, which was the first time there was Peter. It was at what an outfit. There was Peter Cook, as we've mentioned, on trumpet to start with, Phil on sax, me on clarinet, a character to say the least called Robert Jarvis on the trombone. Interesting character on the bass was a guy called Paul Wilson, and
Well, you
Paul
know
was a
that picture that you put up yesterday,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
said to my daughters, "See that man there? That's the
yeah,
man that wrote 'What's the Story in Balamory? Wouldn't you like to
Balamory,
know?'" And
yeah.
I've seen Paul since, and he reckoned that the theme tune to Balamory that he wrote was worth about 80 grand a year. I don't know if it still is,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
that's
We
quite
went up
good.
to
That's
stay with
quite
him.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he started writing it as a little ditty for his children, and he was overheard at BBC Scotland, wasn't it? And it was What Was That All About? And then I think he did Bits and Bobs as well,
There
that
was
other
another one,
BBC
wasn't
one.
there? Yeah,
Yeah,
there was
yeah,
a
yeah.
couple that he did.
And Paul was Paul was an Ozzy Osbourne loving, baroque flute playing madman that would finish
He's
most gigs on the
extraordinary.
speed.
He's an extraordinary man.
Yeah,
Incredible talents, and
yeah.
I do. I think I used to share a house with him out in Ash in
Oh yeah,
outside
yeah.
Canterbury near Sandwich, and we'd be driving home, and he'd say, "What do you fancy for dinner?" And I'd go, "Oh, I don't know." And he said, "Oh, let's have some cauliflower. Right, some cauliflower's in that field over there." And he'd stop the car and go and get cauliflower. And then he'd go,
Yeah,
"Oh, we'll get some carrot. We'll get some carrots." And he'd stop and he'd pull up some carrots from the field.
yeah.
And
That
but
sounds.
by the end of the ride home, we'd have like a big stew ready ready to go of vegetables that
That
he just
sounds about
nicked.
right. Yeah, that sounds
Paul, if you're
totally.
watching, I loved it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Top guy. It was. Yeah, that was about Paul. We went up to stay with him in Gartmore in Scotland a few years back,
Yeah.
actually, and it was wonderful. We had an amazing few days.
Yeah,
And he
well,
hasn't really,
he's still exactly the same. He's not changed at
yeah, not
all, I don't
changed
think.
at all. So, of course, you know, the post this time, of course, you've now enjoyed what, a 30-year plus stint with Mr. Jools Holland,
That's right.
and
Yes, well, there was
what an amazing.
I was incredibly lucky, really, because I when we finished college and we did we threw ourselves into doing the Larks, and the Larks, and it went well, and then there was a time where it just kind of went, actually, this is not going to happen, you know. So I'm sort of looking around, what am I going to do next? I don't really know. And at that time, I was living in southeast London, and uh, I got phoned up to Dep for a sax player in a newly formed big band that was called the Deptford Dance Orchestra. And
Yeah.
it had just been formed by two guys from Goldsmiths College, Roger Goslin and Paul Bartholomew.
Wow.
And they that and so I went and did this gig, and that night, because they'd only just been formed, we were playing in a pub in Deptford, and Jules, who had at that point had just left Squeeze and was doing his first solo album, which was called World of His Own. He was brought along to see the band because he was interested in such things by his sound engineer, Ronnie Burrow, known as Ronnie Box, because he was in the band called the Box Brothers. And Jules came up afterwards and said, "I really like your playing. I need some brass on my album I'm doing. Can you come and do it?" And I went, "Yeah, all right. Yeah, don't mind."
Yeah.
And so myself and Roger and Paul, trumpet player Mark Jordan, went up to Jules's studio. I think it seemed like the next day, but it was probably like a week or two later. and we recorded a tune called Maiden's Lament. Roger had done a little arrangement for the brass, and I had a little solo, and that all went very well. We were very excited, and then the next thing was Jools was going on Wogan, and he just brought out a single called Holy Cow, and on the single it had the brass. It wasn't us, it was some other people, and he said, I've got to do this single on Wogan, can you guys come and play it? So all of a sudden we were on prime time BBC One telly, playing with Jools. And then I think after that we went up to he said, if you can get to Edinburgh and doing the festival, it'd be really good if you could all come up and do it, but I can't pay very much, because he didn't really have a kind of deal or anything like that.
No.
And as luck would have it, someone's mate was doing a play up there who had a big house, so we could all kind of sleep on the floor. So we went up to Edinburgh, and there was about sort of 100 people sleeping in this house. You know, like, I don't know if you've ever done Edinburgh, but Edinburgh Festival is like such a laugh, and you know, it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. All these people kind of didn't know any of them. We're just all sleeping, all on people on sort of tables and in bathtubs and fast asleep all hours of the day and night. And we had a great time. And then after that, Jools was doing a little tour of the southeast, and he said, "Can you guys come and do it?" And we did. We came on and did about sort of 4 or 5 songs, that sort of thing. And but after that, we were just sort of part of the furniture, and we were sort of in the band, and we got and gradually, as it kind of with Jools, sort of people kind of come and sort of stick. Before we knew it, we got asked to do the Hootenanny. The first one was 1994.
Wow.
And that was the first sort of time really that there'd been a big band. Well, Jools did a few things with the Deptford Dance Orchestra. It wasn't quite the same thing, because they weren't really. He wanted something that was more specific to him. I think.
Yeah.
And that's why it kind of turned into the sort of the big band that it is now today. You know, people just kept coming along. Rico came on, and then Rico.
Well, as I mentioned to you the other day, the thing that strikes you has been how remarkably stable it has been for many, many years. You know, I mean.
Well, I think that because there's that thing, the Duke Ellington Orchestra, they were kind of known for their longevity of personnel. You know, the people. There's like Harry Carney, who'd been with him for kind of 50 years, and there was like Johnny Hodges and all. There were kind of people that had been in the Ellington band for a very long time. And I remember there's a good interview with Humphrey Lyttelton, where Humphrey Lyttelton says to Duke Ellington, "So Duke, you've had a lot of your musicians have been with you for a very long time. What's the secret?" And Duke Ellington says, "It's a very simple secret, Humphrey. I just pay them money."
Yeah. Because it's an interesting world, isn't it? Because that big band world, you know, there are plenty of characters there who were known for hiring and firing at the drop of a hat. Sure. I mean, I know, you know, Artie Shaw was apparently a very tricky character to work for. And of course, the stories around Buddy Rich are really legendary, aren't they? I mean, grief. I mean, I often play my class.
You should mention him. It's funny you should mention those Buddy Rich, because we had a guy came on the Jools' radio show who was a guitarist, and he talked about when he was a kid he'd met. He lived in a kind of small town in America, and the Duke Ellington band came through, and he was like quite young, like 15 or something, and he went along to the theatre, and he sort of said, "Oh, excuse the band arrived." He said, "Oh, excuse me, you know, I'm a guitarist. I just like to hang out and sort of like watch you rehearse and all this." And they went, oh yeah, brilliant. And Duke Ellington was really nice to him and talked to him and gave him an autograph and got back to the show and like, you know, all this sort of stuff. And then I think it was like about a month later, the Buddy Rich was there, or he met Buddy Rich somewhere. And he said, oh, you know, Buddy, it's like, I'm such a big fan of yours. Buddy Rich, I just punched him.
Oh God!
The difference between the two approaches.
Yeah, I often play my pupils in school, in class, and you're looking for something, and there's that famous clip. I think it's the Bugle Call Rag, where Buddy does this, and it's live, and he does this outrageous drum fill, which sort of leads to a stop, and the brass all coming and it's like a car crash, and he just does this. And it's obviously live. He stops it and he just goes, now do it right, and does it again. And you're almost like, and it's like, now do it right. I mean, man. And so he I think his reputation, so there's so many of those recordings that are actually out there of him laying into the band. But the Jools thing, you only have to see, I mean, how stable, it has been over those years. So, when you look back at those 30 years, you do a lot of the arranging for Jools, don't you, as well now?
Exactly.
When you've been So if we could have a really interesting conversation, which we would both be taken to court on. But are there, if you had to think of the many people you've worked with over those years, and it's been a joy for me, because apart from like coming backstage and drinking all the Stella at the gigs, it's seeing you on the TV doing these things, with people like Tom Jones and such like. Are there any particular moments you can think, well, when it all comes to an end, I look back and think that person, or that moment was a real highlight?
Well, for I being a big soul fan, one of the top things for me has been working with Al Green.
Oh yeah. The Reverend Al Green.
Yeah, he is amazing, and he I've worked with him twice now, and he came, the first time we worked with him, he came into the studio, and he pretended that he'd had a stroke. So he came in, and he was kind of like sort of like all doddery, and we were kind of going, oh, and we were kind of thinking, what's happened here, And he got to the point where Gilson counted the chit, and he started singing. He was going, and then and we were all just kind of looking at each other, and they just burst out laughing, and he's kind of going, I got you all.
Oh man!
just pretended to be that kind of an invalid.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And then he just proceeded to be Al Green, and was like, and you just going, oh wow, that's fantastic. Very
was that recorded? Was that in Jools' studio in South East London? That one?
No, that was where he was on. He was on. First time I worked with him was on Later, so that was at the BBC. And the second time was, I think it was Jonathan Ross show. So that was, I think it was the South Bank Studios. I think.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. Another good little highlight was when we were doing a television. We did 2 series of a television show for Chris Evans called "Don't Forget Your Toothbrush," and this was in like kind of the early 90s, and we were like the sort of house band on it.
Yeah, I remember that well.
It was a kind of prime time Saturday night show. It was live, and the premise of the thing was, for your younger viewers and listeners, was that the audience, you had to turn up to the studio with your bags, your suitcases packed, because you could be picked out of the studio audience and sent off on a sort of luxury holiday. If you kind of got, my earphones are about to run out of power, so I might have to take them out and talk. Is that going to be all right for everybody? I hope that is.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
And so we had a musical guest every week, and one week it was the finale of the series, and the sort of big sort of thing was that they were going to send the entire studio audience off on the holiday, so everyone was going to go, and they were going to go to Disneyland. Now the musical guest on that show was Barry White, right? And the theme tune to the show was "Bring Me Sunshine," right? The Morecambe and Wise song. And I just had this fantastic vision of Barry White being utterly baffled by everybody, the whole studio audience going mad because they're all going to Disneyland, and then him having to sing "Bring Me Sunshine." Surreal. It was just bonkers, absolutely bonkers. And he was amazing, Barry White. He was like, you know, when you're a kid and you have like a kind of mental vision of what God is like, you know, he's like, okay. That's what Barry White was like. He's a huge, absolutely enormous, and it was hottest day of the year. He turned up in this massive black overcoat, like just sweating, like profusely sweating. Man, and there was one point we had a big string section, and there was one point where they'd gone wrong, and he hit Jools's piano with his hand. His hand was the size of a kind of saucepan. He hit the piano like that, and it went and all reverb, and he went no, like that, and all the strings went. Ah!
Oh, amazing!
He was great. He was really something. Barry White was fantastic.
There's so many.
I've got loads of lots of stories like this. I could go on all night.
I'm sure. I mean, there's some amazing talent. You know, I mean, through you, really, I've got to know quite a few of the band. And I mean, you know, people like Louise Marshall and Ruby. There's some amazing talent in the band, aren't they? I mean, that's absolutely. You know, I mean, it's great. So if you had to, you know, looking forward, then, if right now, then, you know, Jools was ringing you up and he said, right, come on then, Phil, who is your dream ticket? Who would you like to work with that's out there now, and I'll get them? Who would you go for?
Always, it's Stevie Wonder. It's got to be Stevie, isn't it? Let's face it. I mean, you're a massive Stevie fan. It's got to be Stevie. He's eluded us so far. I've never worked with Stevie.
I can assure you that if that was to ever happen, you'd be sort of kidnapped in the car park. I'd walk in, say, look, you just can't make it. You know, I'm nowhere near as good as him, but you've got no choice. You know, I would become a shoe polisher or something. You
know, but he's probably the sort of dream person that I would like to work with. That I've never worked with. Yeah.
Jools has worked with him, though, hasn't he?
He's interviewed him. I don't think
interviewed him.
Yeah, I don't think he's done anything.
Jools also did. Jools also did a great interview with Ray Charles.
Yes. Well, just before Jools had written a tune because Ray Charles was doing a sort of duets type album. Was like his last album?
Genius Scott Company, I think.
Yeah, okay. And Jools had written a tune for it, and we'd recorded it with Sam Brown singing. I think.
Wow.
And sadly, he died before we ever had a chance to.
Amazing. Yeah.
To do it, yeah. But that would have been good. But I never got to meet Ray, unfortunately.
I remember in that interview, Jools asked him. It was something to the effect of, you know, like, you know, what does it feel like when you get up in the morning, you know, having mastered the piano or something, something like that. And Ray Charles, you know, in that sort of manner, when he hugged himself, he said, "Man, you know, you never master it. I get up every day and just challenge it." And I thought, what a great answer that is. Yeah. So sort of the last year then, Phil, what has lockdown brought for you then? You know, I mean, it's
actually,
for you.
We went, last show that we did with Jools was the 22nd of December 2019. So we haven't show since then. But we did manage to do the Hootenanny last year.
Yeah.
Which was good. It was lovely to see everybody, and it really, we kind of all got together, and as soon as everyone started playing, it was like, oh yes, this is what yeah. So anyway, we've got 3 shows, fingers crossed, in the book for August, like
Great
outdoor
stuff,
shows. Yeah. One of them, I believe, is in Canterbury. So
is it?
Yeah, it's some sort of smoked meat festival or something. It's like an outdoor. It's an outdoor. I have to check the website details. I'm afraid I haven't been paying attention. It's a quite recent edition. It's
wow,
and it's an outdoor thing. Yeah, so
wow,
it should be good.
Oh, hopefully, yeah. If you can't hear it, I'll smell it.
Exactly. Well, there might be some nice grub, is what I was thinking. So, well, what have I been doing? Well, I've become a bread delivery driver. A thing that we haven't talked about is my bread career.
No, sorry about that.
A friend of mine and I, when our kids were little and at primary school, we were sort of looking around for something to do, and because all the dads would just go to the pub, and we said, well, this is good. It's good fun going to the pub. We like going to the pub, but we could do something a little bit more innovating and sort of, something that was a bit more useful. So we went to a bread making class, and that was good fun. So then we went to another one, and blokes being blokes, we started to bake bread competitively at each other. Until Simon and I set up like a little sort of bakery, online bakery, where we'd make. Simon did sourdough stuff, and I did just regular stuff, and we would sell bread at the school gates to the other parents, and it became a big success. We were victims of our own success, really, because we got asked. We started supplying local sort of cafes and days and things, and I kind of said, look, I'm really sorry, I've got a job, I can't really carry on. I was like taking up all my time making bread. I was going, well, no, I'm a musician, I'm not a baker. And Simon was a carpenter, but he didn't really like being a carpenter, so he decided he was going to carry on with the bread, and he built. Being a carpenter, he built a sort of bakery in his back garden.
Amazing.
It's like those kind of garden rooms, but it's like a really super duper one. He's got like 3 ovens in there, and he sort of started a proper sort of bakery, and he gets up at 3 a.m. and bakes the bread and all that. Yeah. So it came to lockdown, and he said, well, look, I need someone to drive the delivery van, because I've got all these customers, and I need to get the bread and the croissants and the mince pies and the hot cross buns out to these people. So I said, well, I'll do that. So I'm the delivery person for the Charlton Bakehouse. Check it out online, people.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's really, I really enjoy it. It's good. It's good. And because it's a nice thing, because you're bringing people happiness. You're kind of arriving at the door going, I've got this delicious stuff for you here. I go, oh, brilliant, thanks very much.
And I saw you on Hootenanny last week, yeah,
exactly. Well, actually, that did happen. Yeah, someone said, you bloke, I saw you on the telly. And I, oh yeah. It's embarrassing, really. But
no, amazing.
So I'll be doing that. But also, my daughter Daisy is a fantastic songwriter. She's at the Brit School, and she's just about to finish there, really. And she is a fantastic songwriter, and she's during the lockdown, I've been helping her record her EP.
Amazing.
And playing bits on it and helping her with that, and it's sounding really good. She's released. I think it's being released quite soon.
Fantastic.
And she's doing really well. She's got a few sort of little sessions and things happening and gigs coming up.
Yeah.
And so she's sort of starting to take off a bit. So I've been sort of doing that. I've also been teaching. That's just been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, I think it's like a lot of people. The only way to look at really this last year, there has been plenty of positivity come out of it.
Definitely.
And it's and I think it's given everybody a chance to just reevaluate things a little bit. And and obviously we all desperately, as I mentioned to Dan at the top of it, we all desperately miss doing what we do. But from somebody like you who spends so much of the year on the road with a Jools' band, it's been finding that positivity, hasn't it, and challenging it. And I think we'll all look forward to very much getting back out there, and doing what we do, and probably with a newfound enthusiasm for it as well. That's the thing.
Definitely. And I think it's really interesting, that thing of we've all tried doing online things, like playing stuff, streaming things, and have all really noticed that it's good and it is a thing, but it's not. It doesn't communicate in the same way as when you've got actual humans in front of you and you're communicating to them. It's really odd how it's not as good. I can't put my finger on it particularly, but
no, that's right.
Isn't.
No, I mean, I've even just found that going back to that one-to-one teaching, and suddenly you hear a clarinet and saxophone in the room, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air, isn't it? Yeah, the sound.
A lot of my students had only really just started when the Christmassy lockdown kicked in, and when you're teaching them online, you can't see the physical things that they're doing wrong physically, and that's been a kind of really interesting thing, getting into the same room, and you can go, I see what you're doing now.
Exactly. And also many of mine, I feel like have almost developed a smaller room sound.
Oh yeah.
Because suddenly, they're used to playing in their front room or the dining room or the bedroom, whenever it is, and suddenly, even if they're in like at St Edmunds, we're really lucky. We've got a nice big recital hall. And I'm stood there thinking, well, either it's my hearing or it's the very fact that they're not used to filling a bigger space. So it's great, So Phil, it's been about an hour chatting to you, and I could chat to you for another hour, and there's so many more stories we could recount.
Definitely.
But it has been a real pleasure over these years watching you do your thing, whether it's been live or on the TV. It's been a real honor for me as well, to get to know some of the other guys in the Jools band and be able to, we've had Derek at school, and and it's really, ultimately it's all through you, and of course we even had Jools when I was at the Duke of York's. I just remembered we could talk about Jools' days as Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Kent.
Which is,
but that's for another day. But so Phil, exactly. But I'd just like to thank you for giving your time up. I hope that the bread hasn't got cold while we've been talking.
No. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been very lovely to talk to you, Ian, as always.
Yeah, you're top man, Phil. And here's to our first beer backstage at the next Jools gig.
Definitely.
All right.
Looking forward to it.
All right. You take care, mate, and I'll see you soon.
All
Cheers,
right.
Phil.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Fantastic. So my thanks to Phil for giving up his time to chat to Ian, and to Ian for being a fantastic host. It's been wonderful to listen to Phil and Ian, to both of you reminiscing, and we've gone for everything from Ray Charles through to Squeeze and up to Lockdown. One of these wonderfully spiraling discussions that has moved across the history of music and with that very personal connection. So Phil, it's been terrific. Thank you very much for coming on as a guest, and thank you to Ian as well for being such a generous host. So Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I've been very briefly in part of this session, Dan Harding, Deputy Director of Music here at the University of Kent. Thanks very much for watching, and we look forward to joining you again. In the meantime, stay safe and well, and thank you.